Downwell Demolition goes shopping. There's a big bang near Bristol, and we take an in-depth look at the scandalous delays in the Didcot Disaster investigation. Welcome to the Weekend Wrap. When most of us go to the supermarket, we take our wallets or our purses. We take a shopping list and a face mask. And if we remember, we might even take a recycled carrier bag to help us do our bit for the environment. When Downwell Demolition goes to the supermarket, however, they do things just a little bit differently. At noon today, a pre-inquest review of the Didcot disaster is scheduled to be heard at the Coroner's Court in Oxfordshire. That review comes 1,974 days after a part of the boiler house at the Didcot A power station collapsed while undergoing demolition. 4 demolition workers lost their lives that day. And it is to the eternal shame of the UK authorities that the families of Michael Collins, Ken Cresswell, Christopher Huxtable and John Shaw are still waiting for answers. Sadly, I fear that today's hearing, which has been allocated just 30 minutes of court time, will provide neither clarity nor closure. Before I go on, let's take a look back at a bit of the film we produced to mark the 5th anniversary of the Didcot tragedy earlier this year.
I'm standing at the entrance to Didcot A. As John was saying there, this is the site that is being decommissioned. Some cooling towers remaining. And here at the entrance, a tight police cordon.
Fire and rescue teams from around the country are helping in this operation. One demolition worker is confirmed dead, and rescuers do not hold out much hope for the 3 who are still missing.
The body of Mick Collins was recovered almost immediately, before the Health and Safety Executive threw a cordon around the entire site. The remains of the 3 other men would lay undiscovered for more than 6 months. They would not be recovered until after the remains of the collapsed boiler house had been felled in a controlled explosion on the morning of the 17th of July 2016. On the 31st of August 2016, 190 days after the boiler house collapsed, it was confirmed that a body had been found in the rubble. On the 3rd of September, that body was identified as Christopher Huxtable. On the 8th of September 2016, police confirmed they'd found the body of another of the remaining 2 missing men. On the 9th of September, the body was formally identified as that of Ken Cresswell. The last missing worker was found on the same day. He was identified as John Shaw. 199 days had elapsed since the day of the accident. I'd been driving home when I first heard news reports of an incident at the Didcot power station. Even though I'd been there several times at that point, my mind just didn't make the connection. It was only when I got home and my phone started to ring that I realised that the incident was demolition related. One of the things I remember from that day was how everyone was so careful in their use of language. For most of the day, everyone referred to men that were unaccounted for. It was only towards the end of the day that anyone dared utter the word missing.
I came here to see Sky TV, but as my interview with Sky TV ended, somebody from the BBC approached me and asked me to do an interview with them. When I finished with the BBC, I was asked to do one with ITV, and then with Channel 4. I did about 20 media interviews a day after the accident. I've probably done about another 50 since. That's hundreds and hundreds of questions, and I fielded all of them. But I haven't answered any. There were no answers on the day after the accident. I still don't have any answers. Sadly, painfully and tragically, neither does anybody else.
And so the wait goes on. Yesterday's pre-inquest hearing on the investigation into the Didcot disaster proved to be yet another false dawn for the families of the 4 men killed at the Didcot A power station back in February 2016. It also means that the global demolition industry must continue to wait to learn the true cause of the boiler house collapse and potentially save the lives of demolition workers currently charged with carrying out similar work around the world. Thames Valley Police says officers are still looking into whether charges of corporate manslaughter, gross negligence manslaughter, or offences under the 1974 health and safety legislation should be brought against the companies and individuals involved. In a statement read to Oxford Coroner's Court yesterday afternoon, Senior Investigating Officer Detective Superintendent Craig Kirby said his team had so far taken 2,429 witness statements and collected 180,000 what he described as artefacts. Individuals and companies suspected of committing alleged offences have been interviewed under caution, and because of the complexity of the case, would likely be interviewed again. Given the complexity and scale of the investigation, as described previously, I am unable to provide a completion date for this work, the police officer said. Concluding the pre-inquest review, Senior Coroner Darren Salter said he would review the case in 6 months' time. All of which is nothing short of a disgrace. Directly or otherwise, Demolition inflicted the first blow upon the families of those 4 men. Regardless of the findings of the interminable investigations, the 4 men, that's Mick Collins, Ken Cresswell, Christopher Huxtable and John Shaw, were working in demolition at the time. Regardless of the eventual findings, those 4 men went to work in a demolition environment and never made it home. But if demolition inflicted the first blow, then the investigating authorities have inflicted every subsequent blow and every subsequent injury and ounce of suffering. From the time it took to recover the bodies of Mick Collins, Ken Cresswell, Christopher Huxtable and John Shaw, to the prolonged silences, the annual and largely meaningless updates and the reviews into reviews, it's as if the authorities are deliberately prolonging the agony of those 4 families. That is the greatest tragedy. But if there is something within those 180,000 artifacts, some piece of twisted metal or fallen debris that might point to a shortcoming in perceived industry best practice, then the police, health and safety executive, and anyone else involved in this protracted and bloated investigation is complicit in placing other demolition men and women at risk. This investigation has failed. It's failed the demolition industry and it's failed the nation. It's failed 4 grieving families that deserved much, much better and that must surely by now have suffered enough. But worst of all, it's failed the memory of 4 working men who died avoidably and tragically while providing for those families. Just as an aside, I'd already written to the local MP before this pre-inquiry hearing in an attempt to bring some additional pressure to bear. As soon as this show is over, I intend to write to him yet again. Not a great deal else I can do, not a great deal else I can add. I'll be keeping the pressure on, and I would like to think the rest of the industry would do likewise. If you've been watching this week, you'll know that I've been on something of a crusade over the time it is taking to investigate and explain the Didcot disaster that claimed the lives of 4 demolition men back in 2016. While I'm still angry about that element of the Didcot tragedy, I also wanted to draw a very quick comparison between the UK and the US. As I previously reported, there was a power station collapse in Ohio at the end of 2019, in which 2 men were killed. It took around a month to recover both bodies, compared to the 6 months it took at Didcot. And while the Didcot investigation is still rumbling on 5.5 years later at roughly the speed of continental drift, the Ohio incident was investigated, prosecuted, and closed in 17 months. Now, I've said all this before, but how about this? The Didcot A boiler house only partially collapsed on that fateful day, leaving a part of the structure dangerously unstable. It would take 5 months to plan and conduct a controlled explosion that would bring that portion crashing to the ground. The bodies of Ken Cresswell, Chris Huxtable and John Shaw still lay buried and unrecovered in the mess of tangled steel when that implosion occurred. Now fast forward to last month when an apartment block collapsed in Surfside in Miami. That too left part of the structure dangerously unstable, and that too was brought down in a controlled explosion. That implosion took less than 2 weeks to plan, prepare, and execute. At Didcot, it would be 6 weeks after the implosion that the first body was recovered, that of Christopher Huxtable. In Miami, less than 4 weeks after the initial collapse and less than 2 weeks after the subsequent implosion, 97 bodies have been recovered. 95 of them have been formally identified. US officials have promised the families that the search would not end until every loved one was recovered. And this is what the Champlain Towers in Miami looks like today. Now, I've been fortunate enough to visit demolition companies and demolition sites literally across the world. And to this day, I still firmly believe that UK demolition contractors are among the very, very best in the world. Our best demolition contractors, and I think we all know who they are, could compete with their contemporaries anywhere in the world, no question about it. UK demolition companies are the elite. They are the very best of the very best. They are the Champions League contenders of the demolition world. But based upon the way in which the Didcot investigation has been mishandled, I now believe that those Champions League contractors, and more importantly their players, are actually competing on a pitch that is barely fit for a Sunday League pub team. If you were watching yesterday, you'll know that I was busily putting on my hat and coat ahead of a trip down to Avonmouth to witness one of those rare and impressive animals, an explosive demolition event. And PDC and divestiture, working for auction giant Marshalls, did not disappoint.
We're here at the former AstraZeneca site in Avonmouth, where we've just seen a mammoth blast carried out by PDC and divestiture. Just check this out.
It was a cracking job all round, but there was a couple of points that really stood out for me. First, the explosive charges also triggered the displacement of around 44,000 litres of water as part of the dust suppression efforts. Now, bearing in mind, it was a blazing hot day and we were just a stone's throw from the river. That dust was dissipated in a matter of seconds, so hats off for that. Hats off also on the remarkably relaxed attitude on site. Now, the site is admittedly in the middle of nowhere and the guests, or the number of guests rather, was limited. But while everyone had a safety briefing, we were escorted at all times, and we were placed at a distance that required the use of our biggest zoom lens. It all felt remarkably relaxed rather than regimented, so hats off on that as well.
If you enjoyed this show, please consider supporting us. Go to buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.